and welcome to Control Alt Access. This is episode 1, the first proper full-length episode we are giving you. I am one of your hosts, I'm Laura. I go by LauraKBuzz on the internet. Introduce us, other host, who are you?
The other host says, hi everyone, my name is Arevya, also going under the name as Arevya.
Wonderful.
Welcome.
Yeah,
Welcome to the first episode.
Yeah, this is Control Alt Access. We did a little episode 0 previously, but if you didn't catch that, this is a video game accessibility focused podcast. We are available in video or audio format wherever you find podcasts, so you never need to be seeing us, but if you want to see us have conversations and look at our faces and maybe see some gameplay on screen, you can do that on YouTube. You might see little clips over on Arevya's TikTok, SoundCloud, iTunes, wherever you find audio podcasts, you'll find us, and you won't miss anything out by checking us out in audio form. But we're two people who just really like video games being more accessible to more people, and we wanted an excuse to talk about that. Arevya, do you wanna like start off by telling people who like might not know you already, like what's your deal with accessibility? Like, give the little rundown. Who are you?
Yeah, let me show you guys what my deal is. My deal is I have been streaming now for coming on 6 years, I think. But around 2-3 years ago, I started realizing that my hands did not fare that good with a controller anymore. And I had a meltdown on stream. Because I was just so frustrated of not being able to continue streaming or continue playing the game I really, really wanted to play. And then my chat were just like, oh, this has happened to me a million times before. Turns out I also have a lot of people in my chat who had chronic pain and disabilities. They showed...
What a surprise. Disabled people bringing other disabled people sort of into their little orbit.
Yeah, who would thought? Yeah, so they showed me actually the Xbox adaptive controller. Wow, that was a brain fart or two. They showed me the Xbox adaptive controller and I started playing with my feet, and it's like changed my world of how I view gaming and how I can game. So from that moment I started talking about gaming because I understood that, hey, if I struggle with this and so many people in my chat struggle with this is actually quite normal, but why isn't anybody talking about this? So I started to talk about it and I found a really, really awesome community. And yeah, I have been amazed by game accessibility since then. And you, Laura, how did those all start for you?
So I have had various disabilities that have impacted my gaming for many, many years, and it took a long time for me to realize, like, there's an umbrella term for trying to make things easier for all of my stuff I had going on. I have a coordination disability, I am autistic, I have aphantasia, which means that I struggle with visual memory and recall, I have issues with my coordination, I have a whole bunch of different things that make it difficult for me to play video games, and about maybe a little over 4 years ago now, I was like, I've been doing video game writing and coverage for like a decade, and a lot of it felt like you talk about a video game and then it's like that conversation is forgotten the minute, like a week after the game comes out. And I wanted to do something that felt like it was more, like it stuck around more, like it might actually do something for the industry, and going, oh hey, what if video games could be better for me to play but also for other people?
Yeah,
set me on a journey that, you know, now we're here. So yeah.
It's fun that you're saying it because like I also feel that I like since also being disabled my whole life, but it came to sort of a point where butting my head to into the wall did not work anymore, and it's sort of like this ongoing thing of like you come to a point where it's just like I actually need to find something. And then you find it and you go, oh, why didn't I do this before?
Exactly. So before we like get into all of the newsy things that have happened recently about video game accessibility, what have you been playing this week? You been playing anything that you want to talk about, and you've got anything going on in your life at the moment you want to tell everyone about?
So I'm doing a lot of things, but it's a lot of hush hush things. So we can tell the audience to keep their eyes out because a lot of fun things will happen. But I did play some games. I played some. I had this TikTok going a bit slightly viral with where I talked about Princess Peach. I played Princess Peach. I'm a big Princess Peach fan. If you don't watch or you can't see my screen right now, my whole room is pink. I love pink. I love dresses. I love princess. I am pink all the way through. And played Princess Peach, and sadly were again really disappointed about Nintendo because they were missing so many accessibility things. And I had this clip from my stream where I just said that I was really disappointed, and that, like, talking about Nintendo and accessibility, that is like flame to dry grass.
Yeah, there's a lot of Nintendo people who do not, and look, I say this as someone who, like, of the three console manufacturers, Nintendo is probably my favorite in a lot of regards. They're the ones I grew up with. I have a lot of emotional attachment to their various franchises. I say this from a place of love. A lot of Nintendo people are very, very defensive of the multi-million-dollar corporation that does not care about them, and will get very upset if you suggest they could have done anything better. And accessibility is a really rough conversation around that sometimes, because there's a lot of people who do associate Nintendo games with being approachable, because, like, maybe, oh, I grew up with the Nintendo Wii and I wasn't good at using buttons, but I could do motion controls, or like, oh, it was games I could play with my grandparents because I didn't have to explain controls to them. And a lot of people don't stop and go, it's great that there is a sort of age approachability to some of Nintendo's design, but that doesn't get brought across to disabled players, and a lot of the time disabled players' needs are left out of those conversations, but that's not an easy conversation to have without them getting mad.
No, and it's like say Pokemon example. Pokemon can be extremely accessible for somebody who has motor barriers, and the only thing they can do is to move a joystick and push 1 to 2 buttons. Pokemon for them is like so accessible, because that is like a lot of Nintendo, because they are, as you said, like sort of simple games. They often don't need all of these extra inputs and thinking around. Like, I love God of War and Last of Us, but they are massive and complicated games. So then you go to like Pokemon and it's just like, but I just need to push a button. And for some people that is so accessible. But yeah, I wish we could. I want to make a YouTube out of that one, but yeah. I still need to I still need to be a bit more brave before I do that. But I also test the new Stardew Valley update. I've been lost in Stardew Valley in my free time. It's a lot of, I haven't seen that many accessibility improvement, but I did take a look at 2 things I found with accessibility. One, I found a mod that makes you not needing to fish. Okay. So when you just like fish and you pull up your line, you have a fish or the chest. So you don't need to do the fish minigame. I also found a mod that stops time, so you can pause and stop time. So if you get stressed, which I think was really good, because one of the things I liked with Coral Island was that you could prolong the day. So you can make it twice as long so that you don't get too stressed. That was really, really nice. And I also found out, which I did not know, that on Steam, you have the possibility to have notes as an overlay for your game. Oh,
yes.
So what I did was, because one of the things I don't like with Stardew Valley is the stress I feel, and it can be really hard. I have cerebral palsy, which is a brain injury, and it can sometimes, that form of stress can be really hard for me to handle. So I just go to the calendar in the start of the month, and then I take up my notepad on Steam, and then I just write everything that will happen that month down on a notepad, and then I can have it as an overlay with like a sort of slightly opaque or transparent, so I can like see it, but it's not like a block of text. It's just like a shimmer of a text in the background. That was really, really nice.
That's really cool. I know that Steam's note feature exists. I've never used it, but now that I know that's how it works, I might need to start looking into it.
Yeah, and it's smart for these like things where you need to remember things. When we don't get the Prince of Persia amazing map system, at least we can get this. So yeah, other than that, I have dabbled into Palia. They're still in early access. I think I will talk more about Palia when they're a bit further along. And then I took a look at Haven. I had a stream with them, and that was really, really cool. Haven is really, really cool game. If you want a good story-driven game, that is quite inclusive to like LGBTQ plus and is also accessible, I would take a look at that one.
Nice. What have I been playing recently? I've been playing a bunch of stuff this last couple of weeks. Much like you, I have been playing a lot of things I can't talk about.
Yeah.
There's a running joke on my Twitch streams where like I'll have to go, I'm really sorry, Chad, I have to respond to a message real quick, and they're like, is it a secret thing? And I'm like, yeah, it's a secret thing. I'll sorry about this, chat. But yeah, what have I been playing I can talk about recently? I'll talk about the one I was playing like literally the other day. Hades 2 had a technical test that you could
Yay!
apply to get invited to, and I got randomly selected on Steam to be able to play some of. So the original Hades, for anyone that doesn't know, is a top-down action roguelike game where you are playing as Zagreus, the son of Hades, basically trying to fight your way out of the underworld to find your mother Persephone on the Earth's surface. Lots of selecting random god powers to sort of make a build out of and fight tough bosses. And the original game had some interesting stuff in terms of accessibility.
Yeah.
The main feature that a lot of people talk about is God mode, where when you turn it on, you get a 20% reduction to enemy damage, so enemies like straight away are not dealing as much damage to you. And every time you die on a run, you get a 2% further damage reduction. So
Oh,
by playing over time, you are like constantly making enemies deal less and less damage to you by persevering.
yep.
And that maxes out at I think 80% damage reduction, which would be after 30 deaths. So,
Yep.
you know, after you've died at least 30 times, like 80% of damage isn't happening to you. To make sure that people like it did a good job, I think, of balancing. The game's creators wanted going out there and dying and repetition to be a part of the experience, but they
Yes.
wanted to make sure that if you were struggling to see more of the mechanics, to see more of the narrative, you could slowly make progress through death in a way that was very tangible.
Yeah, and it makes it sort of one of the things I hear most people say is that if the frustration, the feeling of
Mm,
frustration gets overwhelming, it just shadows over every other emotion you have.
yeah.
Whatever that is, a scary game or a fun game or whatever it is, it just like shadows over all
Yeah.
other emotions. So it's important to sort of give that little carrot of like, but you can do it. Come on,
Yeah,
next round.
and I think like it ties in a little bit with another game I'll talk about in a minute, another Grab's Treasure, in that sense of what is tough but overcomeable as a challenge is going to vary wildly between people, and I think like Hades' God mode is a really interesting way of approaching that. But Hades 2, I got to play like 5 hours of the technical test ahead of that game coming into early access sometime soon. First thing, really, really happy to see the accessibility settings menu in place in this technical test even before the game's in early access. It's
Okay,
really,
that's cool.
really nice to see like basically all of the first game's like settings options, difficulty tweaks, all of that stuff, plus some new options be there right from the very first public test. Um, God mode is back, which is really nice to see. Um, the weirdly the biggest thing I had to say about it accessibility wise is um that Hades 2 might need an arachnophobia mode, and that is interesting, and I want to try and open some dialogue with that studio about it. But there is a friendly NPC who is a spider, and I won't show them anywhere in this
Oh,
if you're watching the video version of this. They're a like humanized, quite cute, nice spider who does helpful things for you. They make little armor for you. But
yeah.
to get those cool, useful armor sets, you have to go into a room where there is a spider on a spider's web surrounded by
Oh,
cocoons, and that's not
yeah.
going to be great for people who are arachnophobic.
No, I am not arachnophobic, but I just don't like spiders. I don't,
Yeah.
but I don't have a phobia. And even you just saying that made me go, ooh.
Yeah. Now, I won't show any spiders on the screen, but I will show a door if you're watching the video version. In the first area of Hades 2, if you see this door, this is the door that there will be a spider room behind, and you
Yeah.
knowing that you can avoid it, but it's a door that looks like it has two hands shaking on it. Um, but I think there is room that the developer could maybe like, I don't know, have a mode where you go into that room and it just offers you which of the 3 armor sets would you like and doesn't show you the spider content. Could be work. Like, there are ways you could make
Yeah.
something work to get around that.
They could also make it into a human form. A lot of the characters in Hades universe have the ability to change and transform from animals or insects. Or technically, I don't technically know what a spider is. It's not an animal. It's not an insect.
Arachnid.
Arachnid, then into something else. Like, there is ways you could have done that. So that would be really cool to see if we see an update.
I would, it's the one thing that I would love to see them do something with, because, you know, arachnophobia is such a common phobia.
Yeah.
But other than that, what else did I play? I'll talk about the other one. Another Crab's Treasure I've been playing, and I've been having a great time with, which is cute little colourful hermit crab Dark Souls with lots of good accessibility options.
I can't wait. I can't wait to play it.
Yeah, so for anyone that's not played it, the gist of the plot is you're this little hermit crab living in a shell in a nice little calm tide pool, and a loan shark arrives and goes, "Hey, did you know that taxes exist now? And we're taking your home because you've never paid taxes in your quiet little tide pool." And you're this tiny little crab going on an adventure because you just want your cozy little home back. And then it becomes a narrative about, you know, the problems with capitalism and environmental destruction by humanity and the crime that is being apathetic to cruelty happening to others in the world. It's a weirdly interesting game.
I can't wait. And I can't wait because I'm going to play it on stream, and I'm going to play it with my feet. And like, just to like say that I have played and finished a Souls game with my feet will just be a little sticker.
Yeah, there's a lot of really nice stuff. For anyone who doesn't know about the accessibility stuff in there, there's a lot of really nice granular options in there. Assist mode, things like being able to tweak the durability of your defensive shells, reduce the amount of damage that's dealt to you, reduce the health that enemies have. You can slow down the game speed so that you have more time to react. You can make it so that when you drop your souls from Dark Souls, when you can make it so you don't drop those, so you just constantly have them, so you don't have to go and retrieve them. There's so many like little ways you can tweak the gameplay.
And the best mode, their form of God mode, which is the gun mode.
Give Krill a gun.
You just give Krill a gun and you one-shot everything. I actually saw the developers put out a TikTok about this, where they actually said that on purpose they have made it so that you don't miss any achievement by doing that. So if you want to one-shot your way through the whole game, you can still get every achievement. And that is like applause, credit, well done to the developers that they don't like put anything behind closed doors.
Nothing is
understand.
Nothing is gated behind it at all.
No.
And give Krill a gun is a ridiculous setting. If you're watching the video, I'll have some footage up on screen. But for anyone who's just audio, it's not just giving this little crab like a gun that's an appropriate size for this little crab.
No.
It is a human handgun on like a 2 centimeter tall crab wearing it like a backpack, just this huge gun. And I've been having fun with the gun, because sometimes I'm trying to do the Dark Souls thing of I'm going to have a challenge, but I'll eventually overcome it. And occasionally it's just funny to have like a boss fight give a very dramatically voice acted, I'm going to destroy the oceans and do all sorts of evil things. And as soon as the cutscene ends, 1 bullet and they're dead.
Yeah, it's like it's how to feel like in Elden Ring you're like Mayania or whatever her name is, which just always kill people in one shot. Now it's your turn to feel like that.
Exactly.
You just goes in there, go like, nobody can mess with me.
This is my Super Saiyan moment. I have a gun. What are you going to do? You're a crab. A couple of other things I've played I'll quickly touch on this week. I'm continuing to play Balatro. I don't know if you've played any of this. This is poker, but the rules are a little wonky.
That one. Yeah, now you say it. Yeah, I remember.
So, yeah, Balatro, for anyone who hasn't played it, the gist of it is in theory, it's you're playing poker, and better poker hands will get you more points. But there are these cards called jokers you can buy in between rounds of poker, and these jokers will dramatically change what your point scoring metrics are to the point that it no longer in any way looks like trying to play poker. So you can have a deck that's like, oh, my deck is entirely 10 of diamonds and I'm playing 5 of a kind, a hand that you can't play in poker. Or
Yeah.
every time you play a heart, there's a chance of doubling your score. So you're like all hearts, hearts, hearts all the time. You know, it is a very compelling game, but it is a game I've been struggling to put down. And
Yeah.
this is a conversation I've not had anyway yet that I was like, I kind of want to talk about. I genuinely think I might need to stop playing a game that I have been having a great time with.
Yeah.
Because Balatro is the most directly that any game I've ever played is just numbers go up, have another go, numbers go up.
Yeah.
And it's very satisfying as someone with ADHD to just let dopamine happen as numbers go up.
Yeah.
But it's a game that lacks good exit ramps. And this is something I've talked about before, where sometimes you play a game and it just doesn't feel like there is a good point to put it down.
Yeah.
Or, like, it's very easy to go, well, that didn't feel like it took too long, I'll do just one more go, and then suddenly way more time than you've intended has passed.
Yes.
And I love Balatro. It is one of my favorite games I've played this year. But I know it's getting to a point where it's like, I probably should play less of it because it's very easy for me to play it without thinking.
Yeah, it affects other parts. I had that summer when I was in high school. Actually, I played a online game called Travia, and it was just sort of you had your like colony, you build it up with like getting wheat and stuff like that, but then you could attack others and others could attack you so and so often, and like that you can never pause it, and then constantly having to be on, constantly having to be there, just sort of made me lose a whole summer just sitting playing this game day in and day out. And at the end of the summer I was just like, no, I can't do this. No, these kind of games it's not for me because I get so into them.
For me, that one I lost a summer to in my teens was World of Warcraft. It's why I don't really play MMOs anymore. I know that if I get really into one, I will just lose huge swaths of time to it.
Yeah.
And weirdly, I find it easier to walk away from like dopamine spiking games like this when they fall into a certain length range. Like one of my favorite ones of these that I have a much healthier relationship with is Vampire Survivors. Which is, you've got a character, it auto attacks, you build up a build, billions of things start happening on screen. Runs of that are like half an hour long, and I know they're going to be about half an hour long, and my brain goes, cool, that is long enough that I feel like I got my little dopamine burst, but but long enough that I don't go, oh, I'll just do another one quick.
Yeah.
Whereas Balatro, I might have a run that only lasts like 5 minutes before it crashes, and it's so quick to go, well, maybe the next one will only be 5 minutes, and to self-justify it. So I'm loving Balatro, but I know it's probably time for me to walk away from that one.
And it is a good conversation to have that like I at some point I think games have some sort of social responsibility. And games like poker in general is made for you to play more. Like that is what they want to do. So I think it's a good conversation to have, and maybe there is some devs out there who have some good ideas on how what can you add to a game like this that ensures that people don't feel or get sort of addicted. How can you as a dev ensure that people still have a healthy relationship towards your game?
And one thing I will say in the defense of a game like Balatro is I know I have problems with games like this sometimes. But I would far rather the game I get a little bit too obsessed with be something like Balatro that is like a one-time purchase video game with no ability to spend extra money in it. Because, like, I can't do a lot of mobile games because the way that mobile games, like, in their advertising will advertise, like, our incredibly addictive game, and I'm like, I can't do that because
No,
being addictive is not a positive thing. That is a
nope.
compulsive behavior that you've
Yeah,
put next to here's a spend more money button, and that's not good for me. At least with something like Balatro, it's only my time that gets a little monopolized. I'm not going to
yeah.
drain my bank account doing it.
Yes, I have had mobile games I just had to uninstall
Mm,
because after a month I realized when I looked at my bank statement that what I thought when I played it was just, oh, it's just 2 Norwegian kroners here, 2 Norwegian kroners here, which is like not, that is like really, really low. Uh ended up being a lot because
yes.
that it's just this small amount was just this small amount a lot of times.
Yeah.
And for me, it wasn't anything more than, oh, okay, I need to like not get myself my favorite energy drink this
Yeah.
week because it was that amount. But at least it happened. And I have a degree in economics,
Yeah.
and it happens without me knowledging it, which I like. I have studied it, and I couldn't even see it when it happened. So I was just like, nope, I'm going to uninstall that.
Yeah, it's why I don't play games with loot box mechanics
Yeah.
generally. It's why I'm very, very, very cautious of any time that loot boxes are in video games.
Yeah.
I've said this before, loot boxes are an accessibility issue, and they're something that needs to be talked about because, like, the way they are designed is to prey on impulsivity, compulsive completionism, like, you know, they don't exclusively appeal to disabled people, but they sure are harder to not engage with for people with certain disabilities. And,
Yeah.
you know, there are certain games I just can't play because those mechanics are in them.
Yeah.
Yeah, did
And
you... Oh, sorry, yeah?
yeah, and having an addictive problem is also a problem, and it deserves the respect and accessibility
Yeah,
as everything else we talk about. So yeah.
exactly. Did you have anything else this week you wanted to talk about before we get into the news, or is this
No,
your bets?
I think it's time to play the news jingle, and let's jump into the news, shall we?
Bets.
On this episode's news roundup, World of Warcraft is following in the footsteps of other games and will add arachnophobia mode in their newest expansion, War Within. The Game Accessibility Association of Japan has been announced. The Overjoyed accessibility controller is making one finger controller available on console. A new AAC input has been designed for Minecraft servers. The Accessibility Summer Showcase has a formal date and time. Another Crab's Tressure is proving that Souls-likes can indeed be accessible. Tales of Kenzera SAO has now an accessibility portal on the EA website. Accessibility controller might work on day one on the Switch too. And the game Stitch shared its accessibility options during Nintendo in the World Showcase. Let's jump into the stories.
Yeah, where should we start? Should we go through these in order? This week's stories. Should we start from the top
Yeah.
of that list?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. So World of Warcraft is getting an arachnophobia mode later this
Yeah,
year in their new their newest update, which is pretty cool.
it's so cool. Like, it's 20 years, I read.
Mm,
This is 20 years and they're still adding things.
yeah.
And it's us always, we wish we had it before, but like, kudos for them for actually understanding that they can still work on their game.
Yeah, like we were just talking about it earlier with Hades too, that you know, arachnophobia is a really common phobia, and it's one that's still like only just now starting to be taken seriously by games in terms of like
Yeah,
design options. And you know, obviously World of Warcraft has had spider enemies in it over the years, but I like the reasoning of what got them to realize maybe we should do something about it here was they're introducing a new like species of NPC characters you can interact with called the Nerubians, who are a race of spider people, and they realized, oh hey, having to narratively go and have conversations with spiders if you're scared of spiders might be a progression blocker to playing.
yeah,
Let's find an alternative.
yeah. And I think it is cool. And for anybody in listening to this or watching this, there is a big difference between just being afraid of spiders and actually having a phobia.
Yeah.
Arachnophobia is categorized in the DMC 10, and I can't remember what we have here in Europe, but like where we look up disorders and doctors look up disorders
Yeah.
as an actually phobia, as an animal type phobia. So, and it's explained to have the same feeling as getting an anxiety attack or a panic attack.
Yeah.
So this isn't just oh, it's a bit uncomfortable, as I said earlier, like it makes the hair on my back stand up. It's an actual, I'm getting a panic attack.
Yeah. It's the same as when you talk about a disability in the terms of like, yes, some people might have a degree of whatever that experience is, but does it reach the level of it's interfering with day-to-day life?
Yes.
And that's sort of the point where it becomes a phobia. And it's a pretty common one. And it's one of those phobias that I think even if you don't have it is like, you can understand a biological response to why that might be a phobia that people would have.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of arachnophobia modes in games in the last couple of years that have taken different approaches. Some will just put the word spider, some replace it with cats meowing as little JPEGs. This one is turning them all into pink crabs. Which not that dissimilar from a spider in terms of like how you animate it. It's probably not a huge amount of work to replace. And B, the hitboxes are the same size for when you fight them as enemies. So,
and that's a good thing.
Yeah, you've changed nothing mechanically and not too much tonally, but you have taken the thing that's a problem and replaced it with something else, and that's great.
I am curious though if because a lot of times when I made TikToks about the arachnophobia mode, one of the things people comment on is that it's not just watching it, it's also the sound, because a lot of times people add sounds that spiders necessarily don't make, like hissing sounds and like the scurrying sound, but because it's been so integrated in media for so long time, people associate that sound with spiders even though it isn't necessarily sound spiders make. So I'm wondering how they will deal with that. So that is going to be really cool to see when the game comes out.
I'm feeling fairly confident that they'll get that right, because they took there was an article on Eurogamer about this where they talk about the fact that they discovered there were people within the development team who had arachnophobia, and they sort of consulted them on it, and hopefully those are the kind of issues that when you have people within the dev team who can give feedback on, is this enough to make this playable? It lessens the risk that that's going to get through.
Yeah, and as we know, like nothing can be 100% accessible. For some people, it will be just they knew there was a spider there once, and all they can still see that there is a crab, and they mentally know that this was supposed to be something else, and that can't make them progress. But hopefully for others that don't have it that severe, they can still enjoy and have fun with the game.
Exactly. Like, no game will ever be 100% truly accessible, but this is a step that is undoubtedly going to make this game more accessible for a number of people. And, you know, if there are things that could still be improved based on what their implementation ends up being, hopefully they listen and keep tweaking and games get more accessible over time. So yeah, that's coming late summer / early autumn. So like, I would imagine like August, September, October-ish this year. So I'm curious to see how that ends up in practice. Next up, the Game Accessibility Association of Japan has been announced. And that's really cool.
Yes, it is. I know a lot of the critiques people have of sort of games coming from Japan, especially now in the talk about Nintendo, is that they are not accessible. They are behind comparing to other countries on doing accessibility. But now we have the Game Accessibility Association of Japan that will bring and provide game accessibility service and resources in Japanese, which is so important. As somebody who has English as my second language, sometimes it can be hard because all the information out there is in English. And sometimes for me, even as I speak and I work and everything I do is in English, even sometimes there is barriers there with language. And this hopefully will make it more normal to just bring accessibility. And we have seen some really, really cool games bringing some amazing cool accessibility features from Japan. So I have seen people say it's a quote-unquote lost cause, Japan will never change, and I absolutely do not believe that.
I don't either.
No, Japan has one of the world's most aging population. Like a
Mm.
lot of people, and they live for long, and a lot of the culture in Japan, like Nintendo, is integrated through the whole, like your whole lifespan. So we will see more and more elderly people wanting to game,
Yeah.
also in Japan, and it's the same in every other country, and that will force the hands of developers of making them more accessible.
Indeed. You'll hear us talk about this a bit in the next couple of like the bonus episode we've got from day one of the game accessibility conference that's going up next week, and
Yeah,
probably episode 2 where we're talking about day 2 from it. Um we had a bunch of conversations at GA about the fact that like there's a
yeah,
very thin line between designing for family friendly audiences and designing for disability in terms of
yeah,
making games approachable and accessible. And Nintendo definitely understands, for example, that like, designing for gamers of various ages is important.
mhm,
It's not that big of a line to get a company like that to understand that disability is a very similar thing to be thinking about, and that it has many similar benefits in terms of being able to apply to a broad range of people with your games. Um, I think that there are definitely companies in Japan that are like really starting to get it pretty well.
yeah.
Capcom has been really like picking up
Yes,
speed the last few years. Things like
yes.
the most recent Resident Evil had some good settings options. Street Fighter 6 having the modern control scheme. Um, we're starting to see progress, and I think like
Yeah,
translating, as we say, a lot of the accessibility information that exists on the internet today is in English, and
yeah,
making those resources, be it personal lived experience accounts of disabled gamers or things like accessibility guidelines recommendations that people have put together, and making them available in Japanese will help a lot. Um,
yeah,
Other stuff that the Game Accessibility Association of Japan is doing includes having workshops to teach directly accessible design principles, making things like accessible controllers available for people to test and try out and get experience with.
yeah.
And all of this, I think, it certainly can't hurt things. And
No.
it it only benefits us to be positive about this and to have
Yeah,
hope in a future where
yeah.
Japanese studios sort of join where the rest of the world is at in terms of some of these conversations.
Yeah, and it's also really important to remember for everyone that if something cool comes out this year in the form of accessibility, like say another Crab's Treasure with the
Mm.
gun accessibility, if another game want to also do that, it takes a game 4 to 6 years to be made.
Yeah.
So if that comes out this year, we won't see it come into show in other games, say give it 2 to 4 to 6 years. So there might be a big change happening right now internally
Yeah.
in companies in Japan that we don't know about, but we won't see it before 2, 4, and 6 years
Yeah.
when those games that are in production right now get released.
I think a really good example of that is high contrast mode, because like
Yeah,
high contrast mode was popularized in the summer of 2020 with The Last of Us Part 2, and it took nearly 4 years for us to start seeing that wave of like the Callisto Protocol, Call of Duty, Prince of Persia, the Lost Prince.
yeah,
All of those in the last like 6 months have been like really exciting first implementations of high contrast mode from studios that hadn't previously done it. And the reason
yeah.
it took until like 2024 for those to start happening is the 3 to 4 years between we've seen a really cool innovation and we've had a chance to implement it into a game and go through a development cycle.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Next up on the list we have the Overjoyed accessibility controller app. Have you
Yes.
had a chance to look into this? It's really
I have
interesting.
I have not had a chance to look into it, but I have talked to the maker,
Hmm.
and it's really, really, really cool.
Yeah, so the basic gist of this is that there is a mobile or PC app that you can use that is basically a series of radial wheels that you can customize to have basically any input map to any direction and set up so that you can basically do a single finger or a thumb or a mouse or something like an eye gaze tracker where you just look and map more complex inputs onto just move a selector in one direction.
Yeah.
And it is a really interesting app that I'm really glad they found a way to make work on consoles, even if it required
Yes.
some workarounds and talking to another peripheral manufacturer.
Yeah. It
Because yeah, sorry.
Yeah, in general, it's just cool because it opens up a lot of games that aren't accessible necessarily from the get-go.
Mm.
You can have this app and now you can play them.
Yeah, so to make this work on console, you have to use something, particularly on Switch, you have to use the 8-bit Do micro Bluetooth gamepad. 8-bit Do make a bunch of really interesting controllers. They've made some good accessibility ones, like the 8-bit Do Lite SE. But basically, they worked with 8-bit Do to be like, can you help us like let our app connect to your controller and then the controller connects to the console?
Yeah.
And whatever the workaround, it works, and it allows people to do things like, oh, motion controls aren't accessible for me. I'll do a touch and that'll emulate a motion. Stuff like that is
Yeah.
really good to see offered.
Yeah, and it's cool. And yeah, we will link the source for this down in the description so people can go and look at these
Hmm.
news for themselves and like take a look at it because it's really cool. And as you said, even Nintendo Life actually
Yeah.
wrote about it, which is again a really good thumbs up and shows that we are in the right direction.
Yeah, it's nice seeing like people who aren't necessarily accessibility focused outlets getting excited that
Yeah.
new ways of engaging with consoles are available. Like
Yeah.
the mainstream conversation around accessibility is in such a healthier place than it was a few years
Yes.
ago.
Yes.
So next up on the list we have a new AAC interface, which stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. A new interface has been designed for use in Minecraft. This has been designed by the users of a Minecraft server called Autocraft, which is designed to be an autism-friendly Minecraft server. And they have designed a tool set that's basically, hey, do you find it difficult to do verbal or written communication? And would you rather just have a couple of buttons with easy to recognize icons where you click it and that translates into a more direct, like a more written out communication of I need help with this, or this is what I'm trying to communicate to you, so that you can better socialize with other people on your Minecraft server if you struggle with writing or speaking
Yeah.
directly.
Yeah.
And
It's just really really cool, and it helps like the autism community. I often feel is often overlooked, a bit
mm,
forgotten, that they can also benefit for a lot of accessibility. And but also as somebody who is not from predominantly English speaking country, it's also really really cool because it can help with some language barriers as well, showcasing that sometimes accessibility, even though it's meant for one thing, it can help a plethora of other people.
agreed. And particularly on that note of autism accessibility, it's really nice to see something like this specifically for Minecraft, because there is a really big community of autistic Minecraft players
Yeah.
that were sometimes being left out of the social elements of that game because of communication barriers. And it's
Yeah.
really nice to see a community recognize a need within their own community and provide an open source tool that can be used.
Yeah.
It works in all versions of Java Minecraft. It's out now. A couple of really nice considerations. I was digging into this story. I really like that the default way of setting this up involved you having to type in a command to activate it, but that was an access barrier to some people. So they
Yeah.
updated it so now someone who is like a server moderator can give access to it to someone else remotely, so that the person
Oh,
who struggles
smart.
with typing doesn't need to type out a command to activate it. Um, Really nice little considerations like that are being made now that it's out in the wild, and that's really
Yeah.
cool to see.
Cool. It's really, really cool. And it's also nice to see that it continues, understanding that when you give something out, it might doesn't necessarily mean that it's done. We can still add on it. And when the more input we get for a mod, the more like we can home it in and make it more accessible for people.
Exactly. Um The next news story on here is self-promotion for something I'm working on. This is where I have to be about me for a minute. Ooh.
Yay!
uh, so yeah, the Accessibility Summer Showcase 2024 is happening, and there's a date and time for it.
Yeah.
For anyone who didn't see this last year, I run a video series and a website called Accessibility, where I put my like solo accessibility coverage stuff, and we've started doing once a year around when Summer Games Fest happens and all the big summer video game announcements. We put together a little 40-minute accessibility focused games showcase to be like, hey, do you want to come see some cool games? That we will tell you about their accessibility when we show you them, so you know whether they're actually going to be playable for you or not.
Yeah.
That's a thing we do every summer, and we're doing one this year, and it's happening June 7th at 4 p.m. UK, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. It's going to be about 45 minutes long, featuring American Sign Language, British Sign Language, and audio described versions, which will be available at the same time on YouTube. I know what most of the games that are going to be in this year's showcase are, and I'm quite excited about it now. I've been talking to some quite cool developers about showcasing their things, so
We
yeah.
have to. What we should do is like after you're done with this, we should have like an extra podcast about just everything we learned from the showcase.
Here's the thing. I'll share it with you early. I'll let you see it early, so we can come and be like, here's all the things I've been getting ready to show everyone. Yay!
Yay! Let's do that.
Yeah. So yeah, look forward to it. I am really excited to show people a bunch of cool
Same.
accessible games. I can say one exciting thing about it in advance. More than 25% of our games are playable, or are aiming to be playable by sightless blind players without sighted player assistance.
Yay!
Of our, I think, 18 games we currently have on the showcase, 6 of them are playable without sighted assistance, which is always a win for me. That like that's my standard of like, can we make these playable for as many people as possible?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Uh, we talked about another Crab's Treasure earlier.
Yeah, we talked a lot about it. But again, it's just cool to see a Souls-like game actually being focused on accessibility. It's cool to see them not putting achievements behind difficulty settings. And a round of applause to them, the developer team and the studio and the publisher, of what they've done. And they also, again, they just seem really proud of it. If you follow their TikTok, you will see that they actually proudly talks about this, and they also proudly say that this is what we want. We want you guys to be able to play it, and it's just cool. They have their values of what they want to showcase in the world with a Souls-like game, and it's just cool. We had a big talk about it. We don't necessarily need to continue, but like it's just really cool.
The only other thing I might put here that I think is like really nice is I'm really impressed at the community they fostered around this game. That no one has been like talking down to anyone who's using the accessibility settings.
No.
Like, I've been streaming this game and like pausing to tweak my accessibility settings mid-boss fight, and no one's been, being a jerk about it. If anything, people have come into my chat who are first-time people going, can you go turn on the gun accessibility setting? I want to see the gun. And I'm like, yeah, cool, I'll have an easier time playing for a minute. Sure, why not?
And I think it's also cool because like they showcase what a lot of people in the accessibility community have been saying for years. Souls game doesn't necessarily need an easy mode, but we need accessibility, and people want it, and they show it here. People want it.
And, this game has really demonstrated you can have a Souls type game with accessibility support that doesn't take away from narrative themes of you are supposed to be going on a big, scary, daunting challenge, and it's meant to be hard. And those two can coexist.
Absolutely.
So yeah, next up, we've got a game that I haven't played, but this news story made me go, I need to check it out before our next episode. Tales of Kenzera Zhao has launched with an accessibility portal on EA's website, and I was reading through this accessibility portal. There's a bunch of really good, thoughtful design considerations in this Metroidvania kind of game.
It's really cool to see. One of the things I often critique developers for is that yes, you are accessible, but how would people know?
Yes.
How can people know? Because your information about accessibility aren't accessible, and that in itself, the information barrier needs to be lowered. How can people even understand it? So when you have something like this, then people will easier figure it out. At least if they know what they need, though. That's the big thing. They actually need to know that they need accessibility, but this is an extremely good start.
Yes, and one thing I would recommend, if you have a look at this accessibility portal, they do a thing I think is really great, which is they don't just talk about, like, these are the accessibility settings in our settings menu. They explicitly talk about, like, these are some design considerations we made that are not settings in the settings menu, but they are things that will make the game accessible without you having to turn a setting on. Things like making sure that you never have to understand a color to be able to tell what's going on with something. There's always, if something requires you to recognize colors, there'll be a symbol to identify it as well, for example. Like, things, they go out of their way to talk about, these are things that we don't have a colorblind setting, because even if you're colorblind, the game by default is still accessible. And, like, those need to be part of your pre-launch conversations for games if they're going to be accessible.
Yeah.
So yeah, we don't need to dig too much into every setting that's in there, but I am going to play this before we next talk, because it sounds really cool.
Yeah, and I highly recommend people to go in to see that. Can I play that article and take a read and, like, see if what do you think about it?
I'm intrigued to check out a Metroidvania about overcoming grief through love. I'm like, that sounds lovely. If a little heavy.
Lovely. Hard, but lovely.
Yeah. Couple more stories. We're almost at the end of our news roundup. This one's an interesting one. So we've been hearing rumblings for a while that Nintendo's getting ready to announce their next system. It makes sense. The Switch has been out for over 7 years now, I think.
It's so long now.
It's one of the longest console life cycles we've seen, and we started hearing, like, lots of rumblings from, like, peripheral manufacturers going, yeah, we've heard what the next thing is, and here's what we've heard. And there was a story going around recently from a peripheral manufacturer suggesting that when the Switch 2 or whatever it's called comes out, it will support using your existing Joy-Cons and Pro controllers over Bluetooth, even if they have, like, a new kind of Joy-Con for the Switch 2. And that's not what I was excited about. It's the fact that suggests if Switch 1 controllers work on the Switch 2, the Hori Flex, the Nintendo Switch equivalent of the Xbox Adaptive Controller, will probably work on day one. It would suggest that things like the 8-bit Do Lite SE, which is a low-resistance controller for the Switch 1, will probably work on day one on Switch 2. And that's really good, because we want accessibility controllers day one on next gen.
Yes, and I hope this is the truth. I can't wait to get the Switch. I talk about it a lot. I really, really enjoy my Switch, even now that I have a Steam Deck, and I also love that one. But it's just a light. The Switch is just such a light controller, easy to hold, easy to use, even when I have painful days.
Agreed.
It's just in general, really, for me, like, hardware accessible. I can put it down and just, like, lay in the sofa on the side with a Joy-Cons underneath my blanket and still play the game. Like, it's just in general quite an accessible hardware for me. So I can't wait to see what we will get next.
Agreed. And I hope this does turn out to be accurate, because, like, one of the coolest things about going from the Xbox One to the Series consoles now was that day one the Xbox Adaptive Controller worked. Like, there was no waiting for an accessibility controller to be created before you could jump into next gen.
Yeah,
and
which is going to be really exciting to see, because the access controller is called the PlayStation 5 access controller.
So
will that be able to be used?
They've stopped calling it that. So the initial announcement called it the PlayStation 5 access controller. If you look at any of the branding now, it just says PlayStation access controller.
Okay, that's good though.
Yeah, which reassures me, because that was my concern when they initially announced it, was like, is this only going to be for one generation and then they'll replace it? Because, like, that's the future I want us to reach, is where, like, when the next PlayStation, next Nintendo, next Xbox release, all three of them just use their existing accessibility controller, or at least support it, so that day one you can go, I'm excited about next gen, my accessibility controller can move forward.
Yeah, because a lot of times us disabled gamers have to like not be as hyped because we never know if a game or a console or anything is accessible to us from day one. It's so often it's just like, yeah, we were supposed to have this and that, but we didn't have time or we needed to crunch and this would get cut. You will get it in 2 weeks in the first update.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wish we can come to a day where like our needs is looked at as valuable as everybody else's need.
And then last news story on the list. Do you want to talk about this one? Because I know you'd be really passionate about this one.
I have. I've talked to Lykke Studio. Lykke Studio have a game that came out called Stitch, which they showcased during the let me sure I get the correct name, during Nintendo Indie World Showcase. And what they use, so which is just a showcase where Nintendo shows off all the indie games that they will have on the Switch. And what Stitch did, the game Stitch, or Lykke Studio did, was that they actually showcased the accessibility in the game, which I watched it and it just blew my mind. For something of the first time, I don't know if it is the first time, maybe not the first time, but I can't remember last time I have seen somebody using their allocated time, which is it's like you need to showcase what you want to showcase because that is the time you get to like sell it to people. They showcase their accessibility. And it's so cool.
Yeah, it's super rare to see it done. Like, there was a couple of brief examples in Summer Games Fest last year, particularly I think during the Wholesome Games Showcase there was a couple.
Yes.
And there are some studios that are getting good at doing it, like Whitethorn Games in their Winter Showcase did this for a bunch of their own games. But in something like a Nintendo Showcase where it's like it's someone else's space and you've got limited time. Like, it's so rare to see this done,
so
and it's even if it was just like a very quick, hey, we've got colorblind mode and reduced motion and increased number sizes and left-handed mode. That's all it needs. You gave it like 5 or 6 seconds, and people can pause and look at that screen and see what's there to help them. Such a wonderful use of their time.
Really, really cool. And if anybody wants to know, Stitch is an embroidery puzzle game. And it's one of the cozy games. It's relaxed, sit back, embroider by doing a small number of puzzles, like fill in the numbers. And it also had, like, just the fact that they saw this, which for a lot of people, seeing a game like this can think, oh, but it's so easy. We don't need any accessibility. Because it's quote unquote a cozy game, it's an easy game, it's a you are supposed to relax with it kind of game. And then they even said like, hey, no, wait a second, we actually need to showcase that you can play this even though like maybe you have some sight problems or you can't see as good anymore, or if you get easily motion sick, or if you need help with like colorblind mode, or just in general, you can want to only play with your left Joy-Con, you can still do it. And it's so cool.
Yeah.
More games should do this.
Agreed.
Please.
This should be the norm. Like,
this should be the norm.
Even if you don't go into huge depth, like a few seconds dedicated to, hey, pause this if you need to have a look, here's what we've got worked on, makes such a difference. You
could literally just say, and we also have an accessibility options, and then just showcase it for 2 seconds and then go on.
I mean, I think back, look, it's not ideal to do it this way, but I think it was for Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. During one of PlayStation's State of Play presentations, they just did like a 5-second thing where it's like, and here's the accessibility settings menus. And you could pause and freeze frame and look through and go, okay, cool, I know what's coming, that's great.
Yeah. Oh. It's really, really cool, and I'm glad, and yeah, we before we end off the show, we have both of us has been to GA Conf. There was GA Conf last week. We will talk about it. We will have a special episode from site from GA
Yeah.
Conf next week, and then we will have a round of talk about it on the next podcast, which will be in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So don't worry, we haven't forgotten about it. It was like amazing.
Yeah.
We just thought that it deserves its own episode, so it will come.
Yeah, so usually this is going to be an every 2 weeks show, but this first 3 weeks we've got a show every week. We've got I think 25-minute-ish chat from day one of GA Conf next week, and then the week after we will talk about day 2 of GA Conf. We haven't forgotten about it. We just want to give it some breathing room.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's everything for the news.
Yeah. It's been really, really nice. If anybody have any ideas or thoughts, and we have like a question for you guys.
We do have a question for you, watchers and listeners, if you'd like to be able to share your thoughts on the show next episode. Yeah, because
we would love if anybody watching this would like to have their comment showed up or read up. Maybe you want to respond, have like a little video, some seconds of video or an audio clip or anything where you can share your experience. And what we are actually asking you guys this time is, what was your first experience with an accessible video game? Please comment where we can comment on the YouTube, send it in to us by text or video or audio to controlaltaccesspodcast@gmail.com, and we will possibly have you up on the screen or read it up on the next show.
Indeed, and we will also answer that question in a couple of weeks, so you can be answering it alongside us.
Yes, we would love to hear, because accessibility is so important to have thoughts and ideas and views from a lot of different people. This is not meant to be a show about Arevya and Laura talk about the same accessibility needs over and over. We want to hear from you. We want to give the devs and the studios listening to this the possibility to hear the vast diversity of disabled creators and non-disabled that just need accessibility, talk about their experience with video games and why accessibility is important.
Exactly. So I think that's everything for this first episode. Arevya, where can people find you on the internet if they want more of you and your wonderful content?
Oh my god, if you like TikToks and short form content, you find me under the name Arevya on Instagram and YouTube, and Arevya Gaming on TikTok, because somebody stole my name. But yeah, I do everything short form accessibility, but also I game test accessible games every Friday evening and Sunday at noon over at Twitch under the name Arevya.
Wonderful. You can find me at LauraKBuzz pretty much everywhere on the internet. I've got that good unified branding. TikTok, Twitch, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays I stream on Twitch. youtube.com/LauraKBuzz. I post weekly videos about video game accessibility. You can find me at access-ability.uk, where I put up written articles. Search LauraKBuzz, you'll find all of the various things I do. This has been our first episode, and it was great. We had a lovely time. It was
really fun, and so yeah.
We'll be back with a little 1.5 next week.
Yeah, and you can listen to us wherever you find podcasts. We are on all the platforms. So
Spotify, Apple, Google, SoundCloud, YouTube Music, YouTuber's Video. We're everywhere you might want to regularly subscribe to a podcast.
Yes. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you, Laura. I can't wait for the next little behind the scenes of JCon next week. And everybody, I'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.